Gothic books. Here are some of my favourite Gothic-themed books where the atmosphere is dense, the secrets are many, the ghosts are as fine as gossamer, and the vibes are immaculate. Do you love Gothic literature, or do you just love the vibes that they bring? Let me take you through a few of my favourite Gothic books, old and new. Hello, if you're new here, I'm Sinead. This is my spooky corner of BookTube and YouTube in general, where I talk about spooky books, spooky films, spooky things that we experienced as kids and keep experiencing now, bringing you as many recommendations as I can for things that will get you into a ghostly mood. And poison, sometimes I throw in some poison. For further context, I'm someone who enjoys ghostly, atmosphere-heavy, spooky books rather than anything that relies too heavily on body gore and shock value and absolute what the fuckery, as I like to call it. Though there's a fair few weird books that slip onto my bookshelves. Today I wanted to take you through some of my favourite Gothic books of all time. These include some classics, but also a lot of modern books that I think many people will enjoy. I'm also going to talk a bit about what Gothic literature is based on my studies of it and also my experience of reading it. Everyone's experience of Gothic is different, and you probably have a few suggestions that you want to throw in yourself. So here I am in my spooky little office, adorned with various horror books and witchy books, and there is a lot down there about poison. That is not because I'm planning anything, it's because I do the Poisoner's Cabinet podcast and I need to research a lot of weird history. That is the story I am sticking to. Gothic can just be the word that sends some of us into an absolute frenzy. We get the vapours, we pass out on our fainting couches. Now, great writers over the centuries have described Gothic in different ways, but really, I'm just going to boil it down to we're here for the vibes. We're here for great writing, great stories, great complexity in these books, but it's just a vibe all the way through it. You know as well as I do what you want. And with the book choices today, I may throw in some film pairings because that's my second great love. And Gothic films, This list is not exhaustive. There is definitely room for a part 2 if people are interested. Let's get started. Now let's start off with what is Gothic fiction for anyone who would like the description. There's always exceptions to the rule, but the main principles of Gothic fiction remain intact. Firstly, let's talk about setting. These books are atmosphere heavy. Now you're probably already conjuring images in your head. We're talking crumbling mansions, old castles, forgotten, long abandoned estates and properties. Also a lot of isolation. The locations of many of the Gothic books will have an element of travelling to somewhere far off where you are cut off from society and from help itself, and there will be people who have been cut off from society for a while. The locations are dark, they've got a form of decay with them, but there's also some beauty mixed in. Maybe that's the landscape, maybe that's the old architecture. Dark mountains, dense forest, misty moors that brim with shadows when the moon is fat. If you like the sound of that, you're thinking, where is the Airbnb? Come with me. What are the themes of the different stories through Gothic? What I like to describe it as is a combination of fear and fascination. Most of the Gothic classic stories, and many of the ones that have followed, focus on an element of fear in the story. Whether you are fearful of your surroundings, whether you're fearful of a person, you're fearful of the uncanny, you're fearful of society, of change. There's this combination of fear but also fascination with it. This dark fascination, or this fascination that we all hold inside of us for something other than the norm. Now you will read passages of people being frightened, being preyed upon, being followed, being stalked, and afraid of themselves as well, afraid of what's inside of them and the capabilities that they have of what the other has. The Gothic also frequently starts with the mind, more psychological than they are straight up creature features, even though they have spawned some of the great monsters of all time, you know, Dracula, Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde. It's much more focused on what's going on inside your head. So there's not a huge amount of body horror in that, even though people are afraid of the body in a lot of Gothic in a weird way. Frequently in Gothic literature, there is something supernatural. Sometimes it's an out and out ghost or creature that has been created or has been spawned and just appears. Sometimes the supernatural element again goes back to the mind. Is it all in someone's head? Are they imagining it? Is this real? Is it not? In the same way that you've got a combination of fear and fascination, you also have elements of corruption and innocence in Gothic literature. So again, spawned from the classics, your damsel in distress, you're probably thinking of a few books immediately, and the thing that seeks to corrupt it, whether that is a monster, whether that is man, whether that is society, that can also be turned into you corrupting your own innocence, you corrupting your own faith, your own belief system, society corrupting you, or your own desire to achieve greatness, to master life and death can corrupt you. And of course you have the battle between good and evil. So that corruption and innocence, battle between good and evil. And some of the wonderful modern Gothic novels play with that idea a lot of really, is it as black and white? Do you have a good side? Do you have a bad side? Is the bad side really always got to be a horrible monster? And sometimes we have books that put the evil at the forefront and that perspective. And I love those books. And what I also really enjoy in Gothic literature is you have characters who often turn out to be morally grey, because they are wrestling with their own internal demons, or they're wrestling with something other and uncanny, and they're being challenged and they're fascinated by it at the same time. So you have people who are confronting their dark desires. They are being confronted with something that is not in control of its desires or is free from the confines of strict society. That can lead to some morally grey moments in those books, and they're forever changed by what they battle. This is what I like about Gothic literature. This is what I have frequently found in the books. Other people may find different elements that they enjoy. With any genre of literature over the decades and the centuries, really, to be honest, this is open to interpretation and everyone has a new view of it. Literature babble over. Now to the books. Let's get into it. Where to start with Gothic literature? I'm a firm believer of read what you like. If anyone is put off by the word classics, I get it. Some of the classics, the language that's used, the prose, the text, it's not as accessible as it was back then. Some of them we read at school and that can forever change your opinion of the classics. I mean, I ain't reading Thomas Hardy ever again. Or Mill on the Floss. As ever, the classics were written at a certain time. Some elements of them will feel dated. But as a gateway into classic Gothic literature, here are my recommendations. Number one has to be Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is such a wonderful tale that still stands the test of time. It has been adapted for film, for TV, many, many times over because it is a sensational story. Your classic of a young woman who is married, who goes to an estate that is mysterious, and there is a secret within that house. People have something to hide. The heroine is questioning, is this in my head? I'm not going to go into the full plot because so many people know it. If you don't, go find it, enjoy it, read it. Rebecca is such a great book. I do enjoy Hitchcock's version of Rebecca. Really worth a watch. You want to go supernatural and classic? Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula. I love Dracula, and again, I feel that this is a book that you should dive into if you want to get into the classics, because I think it is very readable. That it's all in letter form. It's a I can't say the word. I cannot say the word. I have a stutter and it's just stopped. It stops that word. Please don't comment and just go, word. I know what it is. I can't say it. Dracula is written in letters. It is all correspondence from the different characters all the way through. You have Jonathan Harker, who goes to Transylvania to see Count Dracula to do a business transaction. He experiences very strange things there. He meets the brides, and then you have Dracula travelling back to London, and the appearance of Van Helsing. You have Mina as a figure in there. You have Lucy. I think most people know the plot of Dracula, and it still stands the test of time of conveying sort of the innocence and the stupidity in some parts of some of the characters, the fear that they have, the passion, and also that underlying hints of sensuality with it. Even though it is a dark story, still when I read it again recently, you have the passages with Jonathan and the brides, and still, it's frightening, and yet it's got that pull of that fear and desire at the same time. See how you get on with it. I'm just going to say it, Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992. It is not faithful to the book. It is faithful to the main plot, but it turns it much more into the romance. Just the vibes of this film. It's so campy, it's so delicious, it's so enjoyably indulgent. Just love it. If anyone's going to ask, love the new Nosferatu. I could talk for so long about the various Dracula film adaptations out there. This needs a separate video of Gothic films. This and a big glass of wine. One that I feel maybe slept on a bit too much is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. The atmosphere and the story of this book is so good. It is quite a complex story, but it has inspired so many with bits that I don't really want to give away the plot of, because if you haven't read it, but a man chances upon a woman in white in the street. She seems distressed. What is her backstory? It is linked to a beautiful young woman who has a striking resemblance to her, a nasty man who wants to marry the young woman, the young lover trying to unpick secrets and plots behind the scenes, and then various shenanigans. Don't sleep on that book. Please do go and look for it. Two shorter books that you might also want to dive into: The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll, I think it's pronounced actually, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Very short book, brilliant book about duality, and that's really about, wrestling with the soul. Also, A Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Anything by Oscar Wilde you are going to have a good time with. His writing is so wonderful. It's so funny, it's so witty, and it's so dark in many ways. And I do think it is very accessible still now. And A Picture of Dorian Gray, what a great story. That is a mere sprinkle of classic Gothic books that I would recommend. There are many more, and I'm sure I will recommend more in the future. If you like what you hear, you like the sound of any of this, please consider saving this, like, subscribe to my channel. I'll bring you more recommendations whenever you want them. Within reason. I have to film them first. As we move on to slightly more modern books, I'm also going to bridge the gap here with the master of the Gothic, Edgar Allan Poe. How could I not include Edgar Allan Poe? The great writer, short story writer, novel writer, mysterious, strange man. There's a lot of stories about Edgar Allan Poe. But his collections, get a collection of his short stories, of his wonderful poem, The Raven, will fill your heart with joy. And also The Fall of the House of Usher. Wonderful Gothic story. Again, has so many of those tropes of people going to a strange, crumbling mansion, a woman who is basically see-through in how pale and interesting she is and mysterious. But a modern take on The Fall of the House of Usher is by the great T. Kingfisher, What Moves the Dead. I read this a couple of years ago, and I think it is such a great twist on the original story. It is desperately creepy. It is the atmosphere that permeates through this short book is wonderful. It is so dark and dense. It's also witty. T. Kingfisher has a great writing style that is gently humorous. It's quite wry, and I so appreciated that in the book. And this tale that brings in some elements of, oh God, I'm going to say spores, mushrooms, and hairs. It's got the hair scene in this, where they look at the dead hair. That is actually a duology. At the moment, it's got a sequel called What Feasts at Night. I also love that. T. Kingfisher, wonderful author. In the tradition of great Victorian Gothic literature, I must highly recommend the writer Sarah Waters, and two books by her. Different style of books, but both of them are desperately wonderfully Gothic. First up is Fingersmith. Now, Fingersmith is not a supernatural story, but it is a mystery. It is a thriller of sorts. It is historical fiction. We have a young woman, teenager, who is part of a gang of thieves in London, Fingersmiths, and as part of a ruse to get some money out of this old ancient family, the young girl is sent to a huge, cold, chilly mansion, and she is going to be the companion of the young girl who is around the same age of her who lives there. That young girl is the ward of the master of the house. She works for the master. He does some weird, shady stuff behind doors. It's all very mysterious. You get this from the perspective of the young girl, the thief, when she comes in to the household. This turns into a queer story. It is deeply sensual, it is deeply unsettling, and it has one of the great twists. Rest assured, I don't love going, hey, there's a twist in it. The twist comes early, and it's brilliant. If you want something supernatural, I highly recommend The Little Stranger, also by Sarah Waters. Now, this is set in the 1940s. There was a film adaptation of it. Don't watch it. Please don't watch it. The book is far better. The narrator is a doctor who comes to visit a family living in their huge estate, their huge country estate. You have a mother and you have her two adult children living there. They've experienced great loss and tragedy in the past. The estate is really slipping out of their grasp, so it's a story of a family sort of coming to the end of their line, but the property is also stalked by a ghost that is connected to the family, and it is incredibly unsettling and it is heartbreaking at the same time. A warning in this book: there is a pet death, there is an incident. It's not easy, it's handled very well, very sensitively, it's deeply sad, but I still think this is a great book, and I am someone who does not love pet death in a book. I would still highly recommend this. One of my favourite writers creating Gothic stories today is Laura Purcell, who has written The Silent Companions, which I've mentioned amongst one of my scariest books of all time. She wrote The Corset, which is wonderful. She recently wrote Whispering Muse, which was set in a theatre. But I would throw in as one of her best, darkest Gothic stories is Shape of the Darkness. This is the story of a woman who was a silhouette artist. She has quite a stressful home life. She has an illness that she is recovering from. But then she realises one of her clients has been murdered, and a mystery surrounds what may have happened, and the finger of blame might be pointed towards her household. And it seems that a killer is on the loose targeting her client. This story also intertwines with the tale of a child medium, very Victorian, very Gothic, a young girl who is forced to work with her family as a spiritualist, as a conduit to the spirits, to the other world for very rich families. And that's a wonderful slice of Victorian history. It is such a creepy, dark book. It wonderfully captures Victorian society and all of those Gothic tropes. It is slow burn building to a very dark, unsettling conclusion. If you think Gothic and the words fairy tales come to mind, you know the kind of fairy tales. The fairy tales where no one lives happily ever after, people's feet are cut off and children are abandoned in the woods and monsters literally eat people alive and there's some sort of moral at the end of it, but really it's just been a really great gory tale. Then you've got to dive into The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. Angela Carter has taken a collection of traditional fairy tales and twisted them in her own inimitable way to make them darker, to make them much more sensual. There is great eroticism through these books and really creepy elements to it. You have the story of Bluebeard in there, you have the story of Red Riding Hood, you have so many great tales that just ooze dark delight. I'll throw in another film pairing here. You must watch The Company of Wolves. This is one of my favourite films of all time. Again, incredibly lurid, indulgent, Gothic fairy tale. It is a little bit gory as well, so tread carefully. Sort of the dreamscape of a young girl who imagines herself as Red Riding Hood. And it is a twist on that story. It is not for the faint-hearted, it is a little dated, but if you love that indulgent kind of Gothic fairy tale, that is a film to watch. And definitely read The Bloody Chamber. A couple of modern books that have done a twist on the Gothic tradition by changing the location to something that we wouldn't normally expect are The Hacienda and Mexican Gothic. They create their own wonderful Gothic stories, but they set them in bright, beautiful locations. So The Hacienda is set in Mexico around just after the Mexican Revolution. A young woman has recently married and she has her own hacienda to run. She receives a very chilly reception from certain family members who are also housed there, and also the servants are whispering about secrets and witchcraft and strange things that happen in the household. And we learn very quickly there's a very, very angry spirit within its walls. This girl needs help, and who will help? A sexy priest. This book does have a sexy priest who will come along and is skilled in the ways of black magic, or well, he would call it black magic, and they have to battle this entity that is in the household. It is a really, really great, scary story. It is full of atmosphere, full of detail. The central tension between the two main characters is great. It makes for a great romance. I just loved it. Likewise, Mexican Gothic. What a brilliant, brilliant, just deliciously indulgent book. Again, set in Mexico, we have a young woman who is going to stay with her sister who has been married off. Her sister writes to her saying that she needs help. She is not well. She is living in her beautiful, opulent estate, but something is wrong. So our beautifully stylish, gorgeous heroine rushes to her aid to try and unpick the secrets of this house. This is beautiful Mexican splendor and those dark Gothic mansions combined in one. Mexican Gothic is so enjoyable, such a great tale. It builds to quite a crazy conclusion, but I didn't mind that at all because I just love the setting of it. Vibes, immaculate. Shirley Jackson is one of our great horror writers of all time. A lot of people mentioned on a previous video about her great book, The Haunting of Hill House, as one of the scariest books of all time. It is brilliant. And I really, really loved We Have Always Lived in the Castle. It is a short and simple story of a family living in their big old house and the whispers that surround them, that this is a family potentially of murderers. Several members of the family have died in the past, and who was really responsible? And should any strangers be wandering into this house, what are their motives? This is secret upon secret upon darkness, beautifully led in a wonderfully rich, grim story by a master of horror, Shirley Jackson. Recent Gothic reads for me that I must throw in here. One is My Darling Dreadful Thing. A young woman working as a medium with her mother, her very cruel, very nasty mother, but the young girl can see spirits, she can see ghosts, and this mother figure for her is now using her just to make money. But at one of the seances the mother holds, a beautiful woman appears and asks about her dead husband, and our heroine Bruce connects with her. The beautiful woman Agnes offers to take her away to her old and crumbling estate. There's a lot of crumbling estates in these, I realise. They develop a relationship. This is a queer story. It is also brimming with ghosts. It's a really nice twist on it because the ghosts in the story are companions to those who see them. They're very gruesome and grim the way they're described, but they also understand what is going on in the spirit world around them, and there's also malevolent forces at work at this estate. At the beginning of the book, we understand that there have been deaths at the estate and Bruce needs to answer for them, and that mystery unfolds as we go. This is such a wonderful story, dripping with Gothic tropes and atmosphere. I cannot wait to read this author's next book that is out later this year. Okay, that was a rattle through a small selection of great Gothic books that I have enjoyed over the years. There is definitely room for a part 2 if people love this video. Trust me when I say that I have a list in front of me of more classic books and more modern books that I was wrestling with, going, well, how can I do a video and not mention these? If you have suggestions of great Gothic books that you feel like any Gothic fiction lover should read, or books that you think are a bit slept on and need more praise, or just ones that you want to shout about, and films too, please drop them in the comments. Let me know your favourites. If you like this video, please like, save, subscribe. Send this video to someone you like to impress them when it's a full moon with a raven, and let me know if there is more content that you would like me to witter on about in the dark, dark evenings. Stay spooky, but bye!